After you upload a copy of your Flare project to MadCap Central, you need to make sure the files stay in sync. When you make changes to your Flare project locally, these changes need to be transferred to the cloned project in Central. And if there are other authors on your team using the same project, you'll need to make sure you get their changes into your local Flare project too. The idea is that the local project on each user's computer, as well as the cloned project on Central, should all have exactly the same files at some point. And when you're certain that the cloned project on Central has the most recent changes from all writers, you can then generate and publish builds in Central, knowing that you're dealing with an updated project. Dual bound means that your project has one binding to a third-party source control provider, such as Git, TFS, SVN, or Perforce, and then a second binding to Central. Here's something important to keep in mind with the dual bound model. Your first source control binding between Flare and a third-party provider should be done from the Flare interface rather than from another tool. If you already have a project that was bound using another tool, you have a couple of options. One option is to remove the binding and then bind again using the Flare interface. Another option is to create a new Flare project, importing your existing project from source control. This method allows you to retain the repository. When using the dual bound model, you'll work just as you normally would with your main version control provider. When you want to move your latest files up to Central so you can build output, you click the push button in the MadCap Central window pane. Here's an example of how it all might work with a team of users. Suppose there are 3 writers on your team, you, Bert, and Ernie. For some time, the 3 of you have been using Microsoft Team Foundation Server as your version control provider. Each of you has a local Flare project that's bound to Team Foundation Server. Then, one day, your company subscribes to MadCap Central. However, you decide you want to continue using Team Foundation Server at the same time. As the documentation team lead, you upload your Flare project to Central using the MadCap Central window pane in Flare. This creates a copy of the project in Central with a connection to your local Flare project. So, now you have 2 bindings. Team Foundation Server is the first binding and remains your primary source control provider. The connection between Flare and Central serves as a secondary source control provider. Because you have user administration permission in Central, you invite Bert and Ernie to join the license. While doing this, you can give them permissions that you want them to have. This includes the ability to push files to Central. Anyone working on the project can push to Central as long as they have the correct permission. Instead, you might want to be the only one who's allowed to push files to Central, or you might just want a couple of people on the team pushing files. By the way, the permission to pull files from Central is not relevant in a dual-bound model because all updated files should be pulled from the main version control provider. After Bert and Ernie are added to Central, you create a team with the 3 of you as members. When creating this team, you also choose the Flare project that you uploaded. By doing this, you're associating Bert and Ernie with that project, thereby allowing them to work with it in Central. A team isn't the only way to associate users with a project, but it is one way to do it. Now you have to make sure that Bert and Ernie's local Flare projects are connected to the clone in Central. The first thing you do is check in changes from your local Flare project to Team Foundation Server. Next, from Central, you send your team a message asking them to do a GET from Team Foundation Server. So Bert and Ernie each open their local Flare project and get the latest files from Team Foundation Server. By doing this, they've each created a connection between their local Flare project and the clone on Central. Bert and Ernie then go back to Central and let you know it's done. Now that everyone has the connections they need, your team just works as they have in the past. You, Bert, and Ernie author content in your local Flare projects and use the source control ribbon to check in files, check out files, get files, and perform other source control tasks. Then, one day, you decide you're ready to build and publish some output. Using Central, you send a message to the team asking them to check in and get the latest files from Team Foundation Server. After Bert and Ernie do this, you also perform a GET. Now you have the latest files in your local project. Next, you open the Central window pane in your Flare project and click this button to push the files to Central. The clone project on Central is now up to date. So now that your cloned project in Central has the latest files, you open that project in Central and build some output. One final note before we go. If your primary binding is to Git, this situation is a bit unique and requires some different steps. For more information about this type of configuration, see this topic in the online help.